Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode at the Data Engineering Show. How are you, Eldad?
I'm good. Thanks.
Not tested positive for any variant yet?
Dodged it. Headed it home.
Talk to the mic.
Managed to dodge it.
Don't dodge the mic. Yeah, I dodged it too. Maybe, it runs in the family.
Yeah.
Good.
On this version, at least.
Yeah. So thanks for everyone who joined us. We are here with Yarin Benado. Hi, Yarin. How are you?
Hey guys, how are you?
Did you dodge the virus too?
So far, so good.
Far.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Yarin Benado, engineering manager from Gong. Gong, for those of you who don't know, is a really, really interesting and great product, a revenue intelligence product. They help you. It started with a product that helps you record and analyze all your conversations, typically for sales teams, but not only. And you can go back and analyze who talked, how long, what words were mentioned, and get insights onto how to better sort of close deals if you manage sales teams, et cetera, et cetera. Yarin joined around a year and a half-ish ago after an acquisition. So Yarin, tell us sort of what Vio was, which sort of was your home before entering Gong.
So I founded Bio around 2017 with a good friend and a partner. And our goal at Vio was to basically take the entire customer data that a company is creating constantly and answer a few simple questions about these customers. So is the customer a happy customer? Are they going to leave, the churn? Is there any upsell opportunities? And the idea was basically to automate all the data aggregation, collection, aggregation, and reporting around these specific customer-related questions. What used to be done as internal, BI and data teams. So we offered as a simple solution where Vio is doing all the hard stuff.
How big was the team at Vio at the time?
So we were relatively small, very small startup. We ran for 2.5 years. Tops, we were like 10 employees, mostly engineering here in Tel Aviv and a bit offshore.
Tell us a little bit about your background. What did you do up until that? And how did you enter the data and engineering world?
So yeah, before Vio, I was leading the engineering team for a bit bigger startup here in Tel Aviv. Before that, I held a role of principal engineer for several startups. I think Gong is the biggest company I worked.
How many employees is Gong nowadays?
Almost 900.
Wow. And so how much, you're an engineering manager. Tell us a bit about your current role and how much of it is dedicated to data.
So I'm an engineering manager in what is called Insights Group within Gong. The group is in charge of all the data that is customer facing, basically. So it's either in-app analytics or BI for customer use. So basically everything we do is around data. Gong, there's many teams and groups within Gong that create a lot of data. And we have to build insights on top of this data.
Yeah, Dad and I, we talked about it in past episodes, I think, as well. We always love the intersection of software engineering and deep data projects. So let's try to untangle that. Tell us a bit about the current data stack and sort of the current active projects, and let us see what's going on under the hood at Gong with data.
So in terms of stack, basically we like to keep things very simple, but at a large scale at Gong. So our data stack is we have the operational databases, which are serving the entire product and pipelines within the product. In terms of data, so we started simple with just Postgres, then moved to Redshift. Now we have a bigger project basically to take data from multiple sources for this in-app analytics use case and move everything to a single data warehouse with a lot of pipelines to aggregate and pre-aggregate data for basically sub-second query times for dashboards and graphs, etc. So yeah, we for operational databases, we still use a lot of Elasticsearch, Postgres. We have some MongoDB. And as mentioned, it's also for the in-app analytics and BI. We're now moving also a lot of parts from Postgres to Redshift and to Snowflake.
Walk us through the different teams that are, how do the teams that deal with data look like at Gong? What you have between data engineering, software engineering, which teams are dedicated to in-app insights in particular? How does that look like? And how do all of these interact with each other?
So yeah, it's a very good question because it's pretty complex at the pace of that Gong is growing. So we have within the Insights group right now we have two tracks, two pods with product and engineering and data engineering. One of them is to create the in-app analytics track. Another team is focused on the infrastructure of basically building the lakehouse, if we can call that like that, both for internal use. So we also have the classic data analysis team and internal BI team. So they all are utilizing the same data generated from Gong. And other, we have data, as mentioned, product analysts that are doing a lot of internal work with the data. Overall, I'd say there are about 30 different people working around these areas of data that is being generated on top of Gong's platform.
What data volumes are you guys dealing with?
A lot. So most of the data that is not being analyzed or being analyzed but not for data analysis is basically the videos and calls. So what we call the media. Last time I checked recently, it was almost 5 petabytes. In terms of data ingestion, so we're talking about hundreds of thousands of video conference calls per day. I'd say many millions of emails per day. Overall, all the data that is not the media, I think takes around a few hundreds of terabytes.
And so you mentioned a variety of technologies. Walk us through maybe, if I'm a user, from a user experience perspective, what kind of analytics am I exposed to as a user? And then what parts of the stack are delivering it to me? So
the largest part of data, which we call team stats, is basically analyzing how the team is performing in terms of sales calls. Gong has identified some very interesting metrics that help salesperson do better. Things like the top ratio, patience. So we basically should have a very specific part of the product that serves this data. And then we have some more advanced things that we can basically track what is being said in calls and track it over time. It's a relatively new area that we're focusing on at Gong, what we call tracking the strategy or the sales organization strategy. Basically, all the data right now is being served either from Postgres, which all the data is pre-aggregated, or from Snowflake, where all the data is basically being modeled using dbt, and almost no aggregation is done there. So it's query time, basically.
How did the data stack evolve in the year and a half that you're there? I mean, you mentioned you're looking into a lakehouse architecture right now. Is that a new sort of initiative, or was that always the case? And when did Snowflake and dbt come in, and sort of what was the driver for that?
So the entire lakehouse solution is basically being in progress these days. We are trying to make it more of an evolution rather than a revolution, but still a lot of the data is being served from the classic simple one big table on top of Postgres. And now we formed the architecture, the new architecture, and basically looking forward in terms of scale and building this new lakehouse solution.
And you also mentioned Redshift, right? So where does Redshift come in?
Mostly around product analytics. So a lot of data that is being collected from either third-party tools ends up in Redshift, anonymized. We don't have any data there, any customer data at all there. So it's only just IDs and raw metrics.
So what are the sort of the typical frustrations that you guys run into in the data stack? What do maybe the internal users like to complain about, or what will the new evolution maybe solve?
So users always complain, obviously, about performance, why this query takes so long, etc. A lot of internal users find it a bit difficult to get the real picture of data because we're using so many disparate databases. And also when we try to bring everything in under the same hood, so data modeling still takes some effort because we're moving. Gong is a company that moves really fast in the engineering. And sometimes we don't always have a cohesive data model in terms of data engineering and analytics. So these are two pretty interesting challenges that we're facing.
Who is driving or who is involved in the evolution into the newer architecture? How, from a process perspective or a human perspective, are you managing that project?
Everyone. No, I'm kidding. The interesting part here is that it's not a classic internal data project because we're also exposing some of this data, obviously modeled differently, but to customers. So they will end up having their own access to basically a warehouse with all their data. So we have basically two areas pulling the same string, both from product and from the internal analytics use case. So it's almost everywhere on the organization, starting from customer success to product to engineering. It's a pretty complex project.
I think you mentioned sharing data with customers. Can you elaborate more a bit about that? So what's the business need or requirement there, and how are you going about it?
So I think I look at it as the next evolution of APIs. Gong has a pretty robust API which companies can utilize and build their own products. But the biggest benefit of Gong is the data that it holds. And obviously, our customers want to build data products around Gong's data. So it only makes sense instead of consuming APIs and building the pipelines and data transformation, is just hand them over all the data cleanly modeled in a way that they can either just plug in Tableau or Looker and just start using the data, or basically just build products on top of data and not APIs.
So they're essentially exporting the data, copying into their own environment through the APIs. Got it. What are your impressions so far? You've been using both Snowflake and Redshift. How is that sort of looking for you guys? What's the conclusion?
We're relatively new with Snowflake, but overall, I think both have their strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, Snowflake, in terms of a bit cost, and Redshift is not as performant, and ingestion is a bit more challenging. Overall, I think they're both okay for what they do. Some use cases are better here, some are there.
Is dbt used with both or only with Snowflake?
Only with Snowflake.
And how long has it been since you've adopted dbt? How has that been going?
Same, pretty new for us as well.
Any tips so far for other newbies with dbt? Things to avoid, best practices from the rather short journey for you guys there, or not yet?
Not yet. We're still in the part of like the easy things we're more comfortable with, but we're still learning as we go.
I wonder, you being a veteran in software engineering and essentially now delivering data experiences into products, the intersection of software engineering and data, what kind of practices are important for you that are different from sort of the traditional internal analytics world?
Mostly it's around the quality of data, which we end up serving our customers. So we treat data projects almost as a software development lifecycle. Basically, it's what's the SLA for support, monitoring, how can you make sure that the data that customers see that went through so many pipelines and transformation is accurate. Pipelines cannot break, so we cannot have data that is it's broken for the past 24 hours, so customers see data that is from last couple of days. So we treat it just as any other large-scale customer-facing software project, basically.
Let's maybe use this as an opportunity to pick on you and ask, was there any sort of failure that you remember that we can look back and maybe help our listeners avoid? What do you remember as a horrible day, whether it's data pipelines or production issues that we can all learn from?
So far, nothing major customer-facing. We did have some mega failures trying to be very naive in terms of how we are going to approach this lakehouse project. We were very naive and said, let's take something like a CDC solution that consumes all the Postgres data, throw it in S3, and then just have Athena or Presto or something like that. And it's just a 1 month project and we're golden. But this 1 month was a battle, I think, for about 6 months. And then we just decided to move on to something more robust.
So what's that more robust thing? Let's just untangle that a little bit. Let's spend some time there. So how does it look now?
So it's basically let's not cut angles and basically just build a streaming service from within the product where we can make sure also in terms of data lineage. So we know when the data was modified and what kind of data was modified. So for an example, if we're talking about recorded calls, even scheduled calls, so before the call is being processed and analyzed by Gong, we can know exactly when this call was changed and modified by the host, was it rescheduled, etc. And then we basically write everything. We almost created our own CDC mechanism. We dump everything to S3, where we have a staging area, I would say, being ingested into something like Snowflake, which is the journal for each entity. And from then on, we can create history tables or snapshots, daily snapshots. We can go back in time and say, let's see how the actual data was looking a week ago. So no shortcuts.
And how did you go about with the lineage challenge? How did you implement that?
So we still have some challenges there, but we keep track of any transaction and data pipeline which is internal to the product, and have a record that says that we know when was this entity modified and by whom. From then on, we try to keep a sequence or kind of like a batch ID. And each transformation has its own record. When was it transformed? By which pipeline, etc. Eventually, we should be able to unroll aggregated data and find out the actual raw data that was taken into consideration for disaggregation.
Tell us, internal analytics, how does that look like? What tools are being used and which of the different databases and warehouses are they hitting?
We have Sisense. We now have Tableau. We have our homegrown analytics, which I'm not sure which front end is being used. Most of the data is being ingested to Redshift, either from third parties or being streamed from within the product. Pretty straightforward. We're using Amplitude for analytics, Full Story for UI analytics, like product user journey. Yeah, pretty straightforward, I would say.
We've picked on you with looking for a data tragedy. Now let's talk about something happy. What are you proud of, or a project that went very well, or something that we can learn from, that you can share?
I think one example that I have on the top of my mind is like we were looking to replace Postgres for one part of the product, which we served some stats. And before moving off from Postgres, we mapped where the problem is, why is it not working, is moving on to a different data store is the solution. And at the end of the day, we identified that with just a very, very minor optimization to this Postgres, we're using RDS, Aurora, so we can more easily scale Postgres. Not that it's an easy task in itself. But we had a pretty big table in terms of what Postgres can deal with. It was just, a research for about 2 weeks, and then the solution took a couple of days. And we were back from like 10 seconds loading time to sub-second queries, just with using the right column type, the right indexes. And yeah, it was pretty interesting how far you can go with the modest tools.
Sometimes the simplest things work like a charm.
Yeah.
But we oftentimes don't spend enough time figuring that out and go for bombastic solutions. Awesome. Great story. Maybe an interesting angle to talk about would be hiring. How do you go about hiring engineers from a data angle? How do you make sure they'll be able to deliver on those big data challenges? What are you looking for?
First, I'd say it's a very difficult task nowadays. But yeah, we all can agree on that. In terms of data, so we are looking for people that dealt with data, not necessarily at the data engineering level and know all the tools and all the how to build infrastructure, but have some experience around data, what it means to like query 2 terabytes of data, how databases and data stores are modeled, and understand technically the strengths and weaknesses of each. So yeah, it's not necessarily the best SQL experience, but more of the understanding of performance, good data modeling. This is also something that we put some emphasis on. So have the good foundations, 3NF, Kimball, things like that.
Awesome, thanks. What parts are there any parts left in your stack that you consider very legacy and are the ones that are in line to be replaced?
Yes, although Gong is a relatively young company, so like the things that are implemented 2 years ago are considered legacy. So yeah, I would say that we still store data which is not for operation use in Postgres. This is something definitely we want to move on from, either to the lakehouse approach or maybe if some other data store which allow fast analytics at a smaller scope, but at a faster scale and performance.
That has been super, super interesting. We love Gong. We used ourselves at Firebolt. And it's definitely interesting to hear such a sort of insight-driven and data-centric product has data flowing behind the scenes. So thank you for joining our episode. Any final words you want to spread out to the data engineering world?
Yeah, I'd say what we always, one of our operating principles at Gong is first, enjoy the ride. Yeah. And the second one is just don't be so naive and say, put everything on S3 and then it will work. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of people along the way to create a robust data solution.
But the first few days of that naive, false optimism, they're so fun. They're so fun. You think all your worries are over before it explodes in your face.
Feel so super powered. Yeah, it will take us just 2 weeks.
Yeah. And in your head, it's all done already. Yarin, thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
And see you around.
Thank you.
So we've launched just a few months ago. We're growing quite nicely, right? Yes. How many views do we have?
Very happy.
I think we've got we're in the thousands, right?
Happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, not bad. But we want more. If you like this, help us spread the love.
Yes.
If you don't like Eldad, spread,
vote for replacing me for someone else. That's fine.
And, we promise to try our best to keep bringing
You're amazing, boss.
The data people from the most interesting data companies. So subscribe, make our mama proud, help us out.
Love you, mom.